Flameskull. Hello everyone, DmDungeonMastery here. Today this video is going to be a little bit different. I'm not necessarily hard reworking this creature. There wasn't a lot of things to really change on the Flameskull because I think it's really meant to represent a low-level-esque demi-lich for the players to fight, or it becomes a scary creature in mobs when you're higher level. What I want to do is I want to go over the stat block here and kind of bring another YouTuber's idea into play. I was watching a Matt Colville video the other day, and he mentioned that it is very cumbersome for a dungeon master to run any monster that has a spellcasting ability, because you're grafting another game mechanic onto an already complicated system, because you have to keep track of all these monsters' hit points plus what's going on around in the environment. And now if you add a spellcasting to a creature, you're gonna have to either print out the spell list, bring spell cards if you have those, which are going to be irrelevant shortly whenever the 2024 D&D edition comes out, or you will have to flip through tabs like I do because I'm lazy and I don't want to print out a spell sheet for a creature that's probably going to survive maybe all of 5 rounds of combat before getting obliterated. If you have multiple spellcasters, it's even worse, because then that's multiple different creatures you have to keep track of their spells for. So what I did was something a little bit different with the Flameskull here today. I'm going to show you what I did, but first we're going to go over the 2014 stat block, and then we're just going to review the creature. I'll give you my opinion. So let's start off here. We're working with a tiny undead. It is neutral evil. These are spawned from some horrific ritual that causes a corpse's head to burst into flames and rip itself off of the body. They have a 40-foot fly speed of hover. They cannot walk. They have no walking speed. Strength. The ability scores are pretty good. I mean, it has no body, so a low strength score makes sense. It has a skill of Arcana, Perception. It has immunities to Cold, Fire, and Poison. Condition immunities to Charmed, Frightened, Paralyzed, Poison, Prone. Dark Vision of 60 feet. It can speak Common. It could probably speak whatever language the creature knew in life, if I had to take a guess. It's a challenge rating 4, so it's a low-level boss fight creature. This would be a really fun one-shot boss if you had like low-level player characters and you had a bunch of new players in the game. I think you guys should look more at the Flameskull like that, like a mini version of a demi-lich in a way. We have a proficiency bonus of +2. Then we have the abilities section here. We have Illumination. The Flameskull sheds either dim light in a 15-foot radius or bright light in a 15-foot radius and dim light for an additional 15 feet. So it's essentially like a giant floating torch. Well, not really giant. It's a head. So it's a floating head that's got flames wreathed around it. We'll go into magic resistance. This makes it fairly scary if you're a spellcaster and you're trying to make saving throws. This is a pretty good defensive ability that the Flameskull has, and you'll see when we get to its spells are pretty defensive too, some of them. We have Rejuvenation. This is another cool thing that kind of gives it that demi-lich-esque ability here. So if the Flameskull is destroyed, it regains all its hit points in 1 hour unless holy water is sprinkled on its remains, or a dispel magic or remove curse spell is cast on them. It's got a lot of conditions that it could be destroyed by, but just think, new players this is the perfect creature boss for new players into Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. It's a scary monster. It's wild. It's got a lot of personality behind it. They cackle and they laugh, and I mean, you can give it a personality too. Like, let's say the skull's resting on a pillar, and the players walk into this room after clearing out this little cemetery. You can make it like a 5-room dungeon or something in a crypt, where a necromancer attempted to revive the skull of this evil man, and the ritual ended up killing the necromancer, but his remnant undead were roaming about nearby villages, and you tracked it back to here, finding what you thought was going to be a necromancer. Instead, the necromancer's burnt corpses on the ground, and you just have this Flameskull floating around the room, laughing and speaking to itself in this crazy, really incredibly fast-paced tone of voice. Just sounds absolutely insane, like you put your ear up to an insane asylum door. I think it's a fun monster. I've never ran one of these before, but I want to. Let's move into the spellcasting portion of its stat block. It's a 5th level spellcaster, and its spellcasting ability is intelligence. It's a DC 13 for its spell save DC, and it has a +5 to hit with spell attacks, and it has the following wizard spells prepared. We have Mage Hand, and then we have its 1st level spells, Magic Missile and Shield. 2nd level spells, Blur, Flaming Sphere. 3rd level, Fireball. That's its big signature move, but we move into the actions, and it can do one thing, which is cast Fire Ray, which does 3d6 plus 3 fire damage, and it can use that twice. So, you know, it's technically, you're supposed to be thinking it's not just that, it's got all the spells also, but I thought to myself, well, if it is annoying to keep track of spells and have to bring a whole separate thing in addition to the creature stat block, why don't I just take the spells and put them onto the stat block? So that's what we're gonna get into when we look at my creature, and I did make my own couple changes to it. I can't just take a creature and not add my own flair to it, of course, so we're gonna get into my stat block now. Alright, let's go ahead and jump into this Flameskull rework here. So, the Flameskull is an interesting enemy overall, I think. It really comes down to how you play it. So I just would like to read a snippet from the wiki here. So its combat strategy states that when initiating combat against intruders, Flameskulls would speak aloud and lure them into traps, or else lie to them about other dangers in the area. Those with Mage Hand used it to open and close doors, trigger and reset traps, manipulate other objects as needed to suit their tactics. They took pains to avoid melee and missile attacks, and focused on flying high to a place that's safe and hurling fire spells down at trespassers. So, what we gather from that is a Flameskull never ever wants to be in melee combat. In fact, that's their biggest weakness. So they are very very hard to hit with spell attacks, and you'll see that on my stat block here. If we move into the stats portion of the Flameskull, the only change that I made was I gave it a lightning immunity, because it's a skeletal entity. I was thinking it almost should have a vulnerability to bludgeoning damage like skeletons do, but I don't know why I didn't add it. I guess I just didn't want it to have too many weaknesses, because it already only has 40 hit points. So I think its biggest weakness is being in melee, but it'll never be in melee. So if you're a melee character, a martial melee character, and you have a flying capability, that's probably the easiest way to kill a Flameskull. It only has 40 hit points. That's like 2-3 hits maybe on average before it explodes into a billion pieces. Moving down to the spell casting, I changed how the spell casting works. That's the only ability in the ability section that is different. So I went with the, I think it's called Mordenkainen's Monsters of the Multiverse version of spellcasting for NPC stat blocks, and instead of spell slots, which you would have to keep track of, assuming if you wanted to run multiple of these, that's a nightmare in terms of bookkeeping. You're gonna have to keep track of 4 different creatures, spell slots, and all that. No, we're just gonna say that they are daily spell castings. So still got the same stats, but it's now, instead of level 1 spell slots, it's 3 times a day spell slots. So you have your 3 times a day each, magic, missile, and shield. And yes, this also means that he cannot upcast spells anymore, but to balance that out, I gave it a couple more DM Dungeon Mastery special abilities after reading its wiki, and you're gonna see when we get into that. But continuing, we have the 2 casts per day now. This is Blur and Flaming Sphere, so these could both be cast twice a day. You'll get more casts overall, but there'll be less damage if you were one for upcasting spells. And then we have the Fireball. It's still once per day, so he can still cast Fireball. That's it for the abilities and traits. Let's move into the actions. Alright, jumping in to DM Dungeon Mastery actions. So I think you guys are gonna like what I changed here. I gave it some more variety for when it runs out of spell slots, because I wanted it to be inherently magical and not just based on what I think it's implied that the spells come from what the caster knew in life. But I wanted to make it a little bit more unique and have some extra things that it could do. So none of these are game-breakingly strong or heavily increase its challenge rating, except for one is a little scary, but it can only use it once per day. So let's start with Fire Ray. Same exact spell attack. It's not a spell, it's a spell attack, but nothing has changed there. But we're gonna see what I did with the actual spells, and I actually am kind of excited because I think I kind of cracked the code on running spellcasters as NPCs now. So let's move up to its first new ability from me, Green Flame Bite. It says that very rarely they can bite something. It's never going to want to do that. This is like a last-ditch effort. It can use this twice, so it's +5 to hit. It does 1 piercing damage, and then it does 2d6 fire damage. So it's like a green flame wreathed bite. So the inside of its head is still flaming and burning you when it bites you. It's not the bite that hurts, it's the fire. This sick, rancid-looking greenish flame. And then we move into a second ability here called Exhaustion Ray, which it said that it could cast these on the wiki, and I thought it was an interesting little ability that could give it just a little bit of control for its like base attacks. So this is not a spell either. This is just one of the abilities, just like Fire Ray, but it can't cast this twice in one turn anyways. If you had multiple of them, they could cast this on one target. So it says a target within 35 feet of the Flameskull's choice must make a DC 13 con save. On a failure, and you'll see I heavily abbreviated words for this because I don't normally like doing that, but if you don't do it when you're adding spells to a creature stat block, it's going to make the stat block a 4-page essay, and then you're just going to be annoyed trying to flip through and find what spell does what. It's just too much text, and it's an eyesore. So you see it says DC 13 con save. Usually I would write out Constitution. It says fail. Target becomes fatigued. Disadvantage on ability checks. Cannot dash. That's what fatigued does with this ability, and it says that lasts for 1 minute. And it says if the target is already fatigued, they do the saving throw at disadvantage. So if it hits it with this once, you get fatigued, and then if it hits you again with this, you become exhausted if you fail it the second time, which will be at disadvantage, so it's a highly likely chance. But it's only DC 13, so it's not that bad. If you get exhausted this way, it lasts until a short rest, but it has no effect if you're already exhausted. So you can't get more than 1 point of exhaustion this way. That's going to be Exhaustion Ray. Let's move into Green Flame Vomit. It says that the Flameskulls are able to vomit green flame occasionally, so I made this a Recharge 6 ability. So this is just a little... It has to get close to do this. So Green Flame Vomit, the Flameskull cackles and exhales a 15-foot cone of green fire. It's a DC 13 dex save. On a fail, the target takes 4d6 fire damage, and they ignite for 1 minute. They take 2d6 fire damage at the start of their turn. If they succeed the saving throw, however, they only take half damage and they don't catch on fire. And then it says Ignite. The fire ignites flammable objects not worn or carried also, and it requires an action to douse the flames. So, yeah, it can hit a fairly wide range with 15 feet, and then if creatures fail that save, they get wreathed in this green flame. Everything's green fire with this monster, because that just... It's a lot cooler than just red fire. It looks like undead fire. Just something for flavor, basically. But normally, I don't like to abbreviate as much as I had to with this, but we're going to move into the first spell on the stat block. Now, in order to keep track of these, you just have to remember how many times you've used the spell, because it says what level the spell is. So this is Magic Missile. It says first level spell, verbal somatic, 120 feet, and then it's an instantaneous duration. So the somatic components don't matter with the Flameskull because it can just cast them. I'm almost positive, unless it has to have Mage Hand up, but it doesn't state anywhere that it can't cast these spells on the stat block. So that's kind of just hand-waved. That's just sort of there for the spell information, so ignore the somatic component. And if you don't know what somatic is, it's you drawing out the symbols of the rune for the spell in the air before you cast it. You have to make like motions with your hand. But we'll see here, it just says 3 magic darts automatically hit up to 3 creatures of the Flameskull's choice within range, dealing 1d4 plus 1 force damage, striking simultaneously. So I cut down the words. Well, I don't want to take all the credit. I had ChatGPT help me sort of cut down on the wording on some of these spells, but ChatGPT is not perfect and it'll leave out stuff, so I have to go back through. But it gives me an idea on how to structure it. So Magic Missile has been turned into an action now, so now you don't have to go flip through the book, figure out what does Magic Missile do? What happens when you upcast it? You can't upcast it, okay? It's just 3 times a day you can use it, and that's all you get. Then we move into Blur. It says it's a 2nd level spell, verbal. It is concentration. Just make sure you keep an eye out for anything that says concentration. It is a range of self, so you target it on yourself, and it lasts 1 minute, so it's 1 minute concentration. And then it says creatures have disadvantage on attack rolls against the Flameskull. So it doesn't have any of the flavor text about what it looks like whenever it's on you, but it just basically tells you what you need to know, which is a good thing. I think that's kind of what you have to do whenever you want to add the spells to a stat block like this. I'm just kind of here to give you ideas on what to do. And then we're going to move into Flaming Sphere next. 2nd level spell, verbal somatic materials. It hand-waved the somatic and the materials. It's an NPC creature with no hands, so don't worry about that stuff. It says it doesn't require material components in the spellcasting ability anyways, and my cat is jumping up on my desk to help me read this off here. So we have 5-foot sphere of fire appears within range. Any creature ending its turn within 5 feet must make a DC 13 dex save or take 2d6 fire damage, and it says half on a success. As a bonus action, you can move the sphere 30 feet if it rams a creature, so it's implying that you can ram a creature with the sphere, and they must make a DC 13 dex save against its damage. And then it says the sphere stops moving. And then I put in a flavor text, italics, just extra information that you would need to know. It says the sphere can move over barriers up to 5 feet tall and jump 10-foot gaps. It ignites flammable objects not worn or carried, and sheds bright light in a 20-foot radius, dim light for 20 foot more. Something that you don't really need in most circumstances, but if it comes up, you have the information there depending on where you put this creature. And then last but not least, every wizard's favorite spell, Fireball. 3rd level spell, verbal somatic material, 150 feet range, and then it says it in the actual description, a 20-foot radius sphere of fire explodes. It doesn't state in the spell that you have to see it. You have to see the location. I think you might have to this. I might have to change the wording on that, but each creature in the area must succeed on a DC 13 Dex save. On a failed save, the creature takes 8d6 fire damage, or half on a success, and it says in flavor text, the fire spreads around corners and ignites flammable objects not worn or carried. So, looking at the spell list here, on a creature with not very many spells, it's actually kind of clean to look at. It's not too overwhelming, I think, if you just if you at least have a basic understanding on how spells work. You should probably be able to read these and understand what each of them do, and then all you have to do is look at the spell casting under abilities and just keep track of how many times you can cast each spell. And you don't have to worry about upcasting, because you can't upcast with this, but I think that's alright. That's why I gave it a couple extra abilities in return. So the final section of the stat block here, we're going to move into reactions next. And last but not least, we have reactions. So Shield is a spell, so we'll read through this really quick. Shield, it's a 1st level spell, verbal somatic, 1 reaction, targets self, and it lasts 1 round. So plus 5 bonus to AC and immunity to magic missile until the start of the Flameskull's next turn. Pretty simple. Actually, I think it's almost easier to read it that way. Now it's like, you know what Shield does and you have it on standby, and you can cast that 3 times a day. So it does make the Flameskull really hard to damage now. So like, even if it does get into melee, it does have something to protect itself. And our final ability, or our final action on our Flameskull stat block, is going to be this really cool ability called Reflect Spell. Now, I originally had this at 3 times per day, but then I thought, if you're a caster and you're trying to do the only thing you can do to a creature to destroy it, and it just keeps shooting spells back at you, it's probably going to be a little frustrating. And it is only a CR4 monster, so I brought it down to once per day. You could argue that it could be 3 times per day, and then because it only has 40 hit points, but just as a baseline, I'll put it at once per day, and then if feedback tells me, nah man, it needs 3 times a day, it doesn't make sense, we'll give it 3 times a day, but just for now, once per day. So when the Flameskull is targeted by a spell, so he has to be targeted, it can't be an area of effect, it has to say target creature. So he can use its reaction to reflect the spell back at the caster. If the spell deals damage, the caster takes the damage. If not, the spell is negated. So it's almost like a really strong version of counterspell if you think of it too, but it only works if the spell targets the creature. I think that's a really cool ability. It said this, I guess this was a spell in 2nd edition, or it used to be an ability in 2nd edition on the Flameskull. It doesn't necessarily specify, or I just wasn't reading it properly, but I think that's a cool ability, and this is just a baseline actual base ability. So out of the non-spell casting abilities, we have Fire Ray, Reflect Spell, Green Flame Vomit, Exhaustion Ray, and Green Flame Bite. So if it doesn't have any spell slots left, or spell uses left, I should say, it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different abilities. So you still have some variety, and it doesn't just come down to only spamming Fire Ray over and over again. I don't think you're ever going to be in a situation where your combat lasts long enough to use all of these spells, because that's 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 rounds worth of spells you'd have to get through. But yeah, I think this adds a bit more variety and flavor, and actually makes the creature stat block with spellcasting more digestible. So I think if I rework a creature in the future that has spellcasting on it, this is how I'm gonna do it. And then I might add maybe a couple extra abilities of my own just to make it my own, and I'm not just like updating a creature stat block essentially. But I think this is a dub skis on this one. This looks good. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, because I'm trying to get feedback. I'm still a newer channel, so if I make something and then you guys don't like it, like for example, this video didn't have a long-winded intro just because I spent like 8 hours editing the Cloud Giant video, and I just needed a little bit of a break. So I wanted to still upload a video for you guys though. So yeah, give me some feedback, man. Come check out my Discord channel. That's where I'm going to be posting this stat block for you to download for free. You don't have to hang around and chat, but if you want to, you're more than welcome to actually encourage it. I'd love to hear stories if you use this monster against your players now, and you were like, man, yeah, I just overlooked it. I never thought it could be this fun. Let me know, man. Yeah, this is DM Dungeon Mastery, and I will catch you guys in the next one.